In this new guide series I want to have a look at some of the elite PVE, raiding strikes, fractals kind of builds, and then have a look at them in their core build. So as a newer player, you can start off in this core build, play your way through into the new expansions to unlock elite specializations, and then just have to switch over a few things. But other than that, these builds will be incredibly strong in open world, being able to do most story missions, solo things, and as well most open world events without any hassles. So they're going to be incredibly strong even if you keep them once you've unlocked elite specializations. Let's have a look at it now. Guild Wars 2's Warrior, an incredibly strong class for most endgame content. With great burst damage, amazing CC, and a lot of utility and support, this class can shine in most PvE, PvP, and also world versus world. Why I've picked this class as my first of this guide series is because Warrior has probably one of the easiest transitions from its open world build to its elite specialization build as a berserker, making this an incredibly easy class for new players to pick up, play through the story, and then take into higher tier content, making it an incredibly fun and strong class. Now, what gear should you be aiming for? While leveling, obviously you can take pretty much everything, but the idea is towards the end is to transition into berserkers. That is the stats with power as your main stat and ferocity and precision as your off stat. Now, as you level, obviously you can go for a couple of other pieces. Assassins is also fairly good. This allows your precision to be your main stat, with power and ferocity being your off stats. Or anything with those and a bit of vitality will do while leveling. But as you transition towards your endgame build, i.e. your level 80 build, you'll want to go for berserkers. Now, when you get to your level 80, you will play around with a combination of berserkers and also assassins pieces to try and hit a certain crit cap. But as we play on the open world, this will be less of a problem, and also we will probably not have many boons with us, meaning that also taking a couple more assassins pieces isn't the worst thing in the world. Now, for runes, you've got a few options. Obviously, do not worry too much about runes while leveling. They're more of a level cap endgame thing. You can obviously put runes in certain pieces of armor and then salvage them to try and get the rune back out. But if you've put it in some sort of exotic piece and you want the rune back out, maybe it's an expensive rune, don't forget to use a black line salvage kit to make sure that you get the rune back out. That being said, Rune of the Scholar is the best rune because this will transition into our endgame pieces. However, you can have a look at things like Rune of the Dragon Hunter, as well as Rune of Infiltration for more precision, as well as things like Rune of the Privateer. These will give you a couple of options to put in. Obviously, some of them are a lot cheaper and you can always transition depending if you're still doing open world events. Things like Rune of the Privateer allowing you to get more bite duration as well as power and precision for such a cheap amount of silver is better than going straight into Scholar if you can't afford them just yet. And for our Relic, obviously Relic of the Thief is generally one of the best ones, as this also transitions us well into our elite specialization build. However, Relic of the Fireworks isn't the worst thing if that's what you've got on you. Now, once you got your armor, runes and Relic in place, it's time to think about what weapons you'll use. Obviously, as leveling, play around with as many weapons as possible and try to find out what suits you the best. However, my recommendation is Axe, Mace. This allows you to transition easiest into a raid build. With the Axe part of your rotation bringing immense damage, with the Mace part of your rotation giving good supportive vulnerability, CC, as well as some might. And this in itself is actually a weapon set you will see in raids fairly often. Now, you can transition this however you want to, but obviously having a great sword is also incredibly strong damage as well as lots of movement. This can be incredibly good when doing open world events to make sure that you're not getting stuck in place, but moving around to wherever you need to be and doing some incredibly strong damage. The longbow is also incredibly effective for a lot of players that don't like to get too close to targets, especially if there's a champion out in the open world. Having a longbow with 1200 range means that you can stand a large distance away from most targets while doing some big DPS from range. And having a shield in the offhand gives you a lot of survivability options, with shield batch being a nice defiance break as well as a mobilization break, and also our shield stance giving us a 3-second channeled block, being incredibly strong. Now for specializations and traits, I recommend going into strength. If you have a look at this first minor trait, it's called reckless impact. When dodge rolling, at the end of the dodge roll, you will basically damage an AoE amount of targets, as well as getting 1 stack of might. Now that's incredibly strong to have that built into your dodge roll, but it's even stronger based on other traits that we'll take, and I'll show you why. Now in this first column, we have an absolute army of really good choices. Now, I like to go for restorative strength if you do want some extra might. This can be really good for might upkeep because this will allow you to do more damage as you gain power and condition damage when gaining stacks of might. Now peak performance is a really good trait. This allows us to get 5% as well as an extra 10% damage when using physical skills. So if we just leave this on, we're getting 5% damage, but if we use a physical skill, like for instance if we take any of these down here, kick, throw bolus, bull charge, or even stomp, you'll notice that they give us this buff peak performance, allowing us to get a further 10% for 6 seconds. And another really good trait, brave stride. What this allows us to do is get 1 stack of stability when we use any skill that has a movement effect on it. So your great sword has got a lot of movement effects, making it really strong. If not, your offhand shield has your shield bash, which also counts as a movement effect, gaining us 1 stack of stability. Now the second minor trait, building momentum. Burst skills will give us basically endurance when they hit. Now our burst skill that we're mostly going to use is Eviscerate, our F1 skill. However, if we are in our mace, we will get Skull Crack. Now obviously these change based on the weapon that you're holding. So if you have a greatsword, it will be different to if you have a longbow. Now these skills are basically going to give us 15 endurance when they hit, meaning that we will be able to get our dodge rolls back a lot quicker, meaning that we'll be able to hit this reckless impact more often, getting more might as well as doing more passive damage through the dodge roll. Now in the second column, there are 2 really nice choices. I like Forceful Greatsword. What this does is it gives us a flat amount of power, as well we have a chance to gain might when we crit. Now this is really strong for a trait that you'll see later. However, these effects are doubled if we have a greatsword or a spear. Obviously a spear being an underwater weapon, but the greatsword is an extremely strong open world weapon that this trait must definitely be taken for if we use it. However, obviously Great Fortitude is incredibly strong. What this does is gives us vitality and also ferocity based on our power. So this basically just helps us get a little bit more survivability. If you are struggling more with your health than with anything else, that could be a survival option. However, this option here at Forceful Greatsword will give us survivability in another way. Now this third minor trait is incredibly strong. What this does is gives us 10 more power per stack of might. So you'll notice that if I hover over there and you look at the might under Reckless Impact, you'll see that it's given us 30 condition damage per stack as well as 40 power, meaning that this minor trait is ridiculously strong. It's also given us a flat 5% crit chance increase, making this such a strong minor trait. Now we come full circle to column 3. Now column 3 has a few really good options. Now for survivability, i.e. you want to survive in the open world or solo content, I do like Might Makes Me Right. What this does is when we gain might, we get healed for quite a decent amount of healing, as well as gain 2 endurance. Now remember, when we dodge roll, we gain might, meaning that when we dodge roll, we'll heal, as well as gain endurance through Might Makes Me Right, meaning that we can dodge roll more often. As well, when we crit through Forceful Greatsword, we have a chance to gain might, making us get some heals. As well, we're gaining endurance through our burst skills, meaning that we can dodge roll more often, meaning that we heal more often. So this is incredible for survivability, and obviously we are going to have 1 or 2 abilities that do give us might, making this incredibly strong. However, the trait that you'll take if you want to increase your DPS is Berserker's Power. Gain increased strike damage when using the burst skill based on your adrenaline. So what this means is that based on our adrenaline, when using our Eviscerate, our damage will scale a lot stronger. Now the third option is not too bad either, Aggressive Onslaught. Gaining quickness when we disable an enemy, and that's only on a 1/4 second cooldown. we can disable quite often if we do use our mace as well as taking something perhaps like throw bonus. These allow us to gain quite a bit of quickness, and having quickness in open world is incredibly strong as it increases your DPS ridiculously, as well as getting 25 movement speed when we have quickness on us. Then the next traits and specializations I recommend is going into arms. The first minor trait, Furious Burst. When using a burst skill, we gain Fury, but also if Fury has increased crit chance. So generally Fury will give you 25% crit chance, but because of this trait it gives us 30% crit chance, making this incredibly strong. Now on the first column we have two fairly good options. Signet Mastery is pretty much what most people would take. What this allows you to do is gain a ferocity bonus when using signets, i.e. if we burst one of these signets, you'll notice that we'll start to gain ferocity quite substantially. And what's incredibly good about it is that this ferocity bonus lasts for 1 minute, which is incredibly long. As well, if we do attack a target that's below 50% health, we will gain lesser signet of might, which is also ridiculously strong. The other option that is also pretty good is Opportunist. What this allows us to do is gain Fury and Adrenaline when mobilizing a target. So if you do take something like Throw Bolus, this could be quite a good trait to cap your Fury uptime, making sure that even while doing open world events, you've got a fair amount of Fury and Adrenaline. But note that if you do take Throw Bolus or any of those for Opportunist, I do recommend going back into Peak Performance to make sure that you get in that extra 10% damage when using these skills. Now your second minor trait, Deep Strikes. Basically, we gain condition damage when we have Fury. Now this isn't great for us because we don't really have any bleeds or anything on our general weapons, but if you are running the longbow, this is a DPS increaser. Now in column 2, there's only one choice for the end game player, and that's Sundering Burst. What this does is inflicts vulnerability when we use our burst skill, i.e. our F1 skill, and this vulnerability is doubled if it crits, meaning that this is a very good source of vulnerability. Vulnerability is very hard to get when doing open world content, so making sure that you can try and cap vulnerability by yourself is incredibly strong. However, while leveling, you might maybe consider Unsuspecting Foe. Now what this does is it increases our crit chance to defiant or disabled foes quite substantially, I might add. But remember, because of the traits and gear we have at endgame, we will be crit capped, even with just our own personal Fury that we provide ourselves, making this not really good for the endgame player, but while leveling, it's definitely something you can consider for more DPS. Your third minor trait, Bloodlust. Basically, we have a chance to inflict bleeding on crits at 33% chance, as well our bleeds last 33% longer. Now that's DPS, and we'll never say no to DPS, but this doesn't do much for us as a power DPS class. Now in the third column, we pretty much only have one option, but it's an incredibly strong option, dual wielding. Attack speed increased by 20% when we have basically a main hand weapon in the offhand. That is why this build is predominantly going for axe and mace, because we'll gain this effect on both weapon sets. If you do use the longbow and the greatsword, they will be extremely strong and good. However, they will not get this bonus. Now Furious is a condition damage trait, so it's not good for us to look at. And Burst Precision, what this does is give our burst skill 100% crit chance, but because of the armor and traits we've taken, we will be at 100% crit chance anyway, making the skill redundant. However, when leveling, you could consider this if you are not getting the bonuses maybe from Sundering Burst. And of our final core specialization, we're going to go into Discipline. Your first minor trait, Rage. What this does is when we weapon swap, we gain 5 adrenaline. Now this seems pretty small, but it's deceptively good, and I'll show you why in a bit. Now the first column is quite interesting. Your first choice, Crackshot. What this does is allows all your ranged weapons to have an increased ability as well as better recharge times. So if you are going to take something like the longbow, this is not the worst trait in the world to look at. What I usually recommend is Warrior Sprint. What this does is it allows you to move 25% quicker when you've got a melee weapon in your hand. So that's why, again, the axe and maces are pretty good, because this allows you to close the gap quite quickly. As well, we do increase damage when we have swiftness. So trying to make sure that you have swiftness on yourself is also quite a good thing, although generally we only have one source of swiftness straight off the bat. Now the last effect is that we remove immobility when we use a movement skill. Now movement skills are really strong in the Greatsword, as you'll notice that Greatsword 3 and 5 have this removement of immobility. However, the final trait is quite interesting. Vengeance has an increased chance to rally, as well you gain more health and endurance when you rally. Now you might ask yourself, what is that talking about? This is your down skill Vengeance. This allows you to basically get back up and carry on fighting for a time, and this allows you to kill enemies quicker so that you can rally. Your second minor trait is Fast Hands, and this allows you to weapon swap every 5 seconds as opposed to 10 seconds, which is incredibly strong, again making this first minor trait even better because this allows us to gain more adrenaline more often. And also this means that you'll be less punished moving into Mace for CC, because you can swap back to your Axe for damage a lot quicker than any other class. Now in the second column we have a few really strong options again. Double standards, allowing our banners to gain resolution as well as banner effects lasting 50% longer. We pulse more boons through these banners, so if you are interested in taking some of these banners for support play, this can be an incredibly strong option. Now the second option, Destruction of the Empowered, we gain 3% extra damage per boon on the target. If you are in the open world or in raids or strikes or fractals where your enemies gain a lot of boons, this can be quite strong because this will increase our DPS substantially. However, the choice that I always like to take is Brawler's Recovery. When weapon swapping, we remove one condition. Generally on open world and in solo missions, there's quite often where your enemies are putting conditions on you. What this does is this allows you to rip them off, and because of the minor trait 2, we can rip off one condition every 5 seconds, making this very strong. And the third minor trait, Versatile Power, we gain 2 stacks of might when we swap weapons, and remember that's every 5 seconds possibly. As well, burst skills gain a reduced recharge, making our F1 skill even stronger because of that reduced recharge. This is an extremely good trait, and this combos well with Might Makes Right for even more healing on weapon swaps. Now in the third column there are a few good options once again. Axe Mastery is incredibly strong. We gain 120 Ferocity obviously at level 80, so it will be less at lower levels. We'll gain additional Ferocity when wielding an axe, meaning that we gain double effect when we have our axe out. Axe skills also gain reduced recharge and grant adrenaline when they crit strike, so this is massively strong for big DPS. In fact, this is probably one of the most important traits, even going into elite specializations when using this build to do incredibly strong damage. However, heightened focus is not too bad, unfortunately, with a 15-second cooldown on this trait internally, making it not as strong as it could be. When we strike a target that's below 50% health, we gain 5 seconds of quickness. Now remember that if you have taken something like Aggressive Onslaught, that would basically equate to more movement speed, so this could be fairly decent if the mobs that you're killing are very low health and you don't really bother with Axe Mastery, so you're basically going to be killing quite a few mobs quite often. This can help with quickness uptime as well as movement speed. And then the final trait, Burst Mastery. What this allows you to do is your burst skills do 7% more damage, as well as give you swiftness and give you some of your adrenaline back. Now remember, we do need swiftness to make sure that we get that extra 10% damage from Warrior's Sprint. This could be a fairly good option if you are not using axe as often. Perhaps you're fighting a boss that you're too scared to get close to and you want to use something like the longbow. This could be something to look towards. And that's pretty much my recommended traits and specializations. Remember, you can play around with them, increasing DPS by dropping a few things, or obviously going for more survivability based on different scenarios that you perhaps want to look at. So as a new player, you probably think to yourself, well, what do I get first? I can only unlock my first one at 21, then 45, then 71. What order do I aim for these in? Now this is where it gets interesting. As a newer player, there is a bit of a toss-up in my opinion between strength and discipline. I like strength first though. I think the reasons being is you've got quite a lot of good access to might as well as endurance, and you've got might makes me right, which is a decent heal. So you're getting a lot of utility, healing and might from this line, making it good for damage and survivability in general. Then I like to go for my second unlock at level 45 for discipline. The reason why is you get a lot of sustained damage from here, and you get the faster weapon swaps, making this incredibly strong, as well as the condition removal on weapon swaps. This is an extremely strong second choice to go for, even if not contention for your first trait line. Then for my third trait line at level 71, I would go for arms. And the reason why is there is a lot of really strong abilities here, but I don't feel like any of them are so important that there is something you need to jump for straight away. I feel like this is more just a bit of a cherry on the cake. And so my recommendation is strength first, then discipline, and then arms. Now to have a look at some good utilities for open world play. For your heal skills, I do like To the Limit. What this does is gives us a large heal as well as full adrenaline and endurance, and that endurance is given up to 5 targets, making this an incredibly strong supportive skill for your team. Remember also, endurance extremely good for our dodge rolls, for more might stacking, therefore more healing, depending on whether you've taken Berserker's Power or Might Makes Me Right. Now another heal skill to be incredibly proud of is Mending, basically removing conditions and healing yourself. This skill has an incredibly short cooldown, which makes it very strong, and as well removes 5 conditions, which is quite strong for most classes. 2 other options: Defiant Stance, a very small heal, but for 4 seconds all incoming damage will basically be heals. Now this could be quite strong in fights where you know there's going to be a large amount of pulse damage that maybe you don't know how to deal with the mechanics correctly, so you use the skill to, rather instead of going downstate, just get full healed. And the other option, Healing Signet, basically getting quite a small heal every 1 second, and when active getting a large heal. Now this could be quite good for a lot of fights where there is not a large amount of damage on you, but more passive small amounts of damage that you can just allow the Signet to run and just passively heal you over time. Now for other utilities, Signet of Fury, improved precision, and when used active, more precision, ferocity, as well as full adrenaline. Now this could be quite clutch in a lot of situations. Generally I don't really play around with this, I just leave it on for the extra precision, making sure that I'm as close to crit cap as possible and therefore doing as much DPS as possible. However, if you are looking for some sort of 4-second burst, this could be quite good to burst right towards the last few seconds of a fight to end very strong. Then another great utility for Great Justice. This has got 6 stacks of might on a 25-second base duration, which is very strong. 8 seconds of fury and 2 charges. Generally you can just burn this off of cooldown to basically get as much as possible. Notice there is 5 seconds in between charge usage though, so that means that you'll have to burn it twice quite quickly to get some really good utility out of it, and then just wait the 20 seconds for the charges to come back. But what's also great about the skill, it is 5 targets, so when you start doing a couple of dungeons and some party play, this is quite a good supportive skill as well. And now for our third utility slot, I do like Signet of Might. It's just passive power, you just put it on and leave it on. Not very engaging gameplay, but yeah, power is going to basically mean increased damage. However, if you do want a couple of other options, the physical skills like Kick, Throw Bolus, Bull's Charge, as well as Stomp are all really strong options because they do have peak performance if you have it traded. I do like to go Throw Bolus because of the Immobilize and the 2 charge count. This is going to be quite a strong way to control ads and mobs while out in open world, and a good style of gameplay. Other super strong choices are actually the other 2 Signets. Signet of Stamina, getting that faster regen for endurance. Now this is strong, especially if you have Might Makes Me Right, because remember, extra dodges mean we're going to be getting the extra effect from Reckless Impact, getting more might, more damage overall. As well, when used on its active, you're getting extra endurance and 14 conditions removed. that is astronomically high, as well as extra endurance. This is incredibly strong survival and damage mitigating utility. And the other option, the Dolyak Signet, reduced incoming damage as well when used active. It's another heal, some stability, as well as toughness and a stun break. These two are incredibly strong for damage mitigation and should be considered. Another ridiculously strong ability is Shake It Off. 3 condition removal on 5 targets, so you can cover your entire party with 2 charges, and it's a stun break. This is incredibly clutch and utility gameplay. If you're doing some dungeons, this is something definitely to look for. And also in most group content, even solo content, this is such a strong ability. And also you've got access to the banners. These are incredibly strong in their own right. Obviously having a look at double standards, the trait when switching into banners makes them even better. So if you want to play more supportive, like perhaps in a large meta event out in an open world, and you want to provide some boons and also support, this is incredibly strong for a DPS player to be able to bring such utility. Now for elite utility, I like to go for the Signet of Rage and just basically put it on cooldown. So every single time it's out, just push it, get yourself the extra Might, Fury and Swiftness, because remember, we are gaining a lot of utility, especially from the Fury and the Swiftness itself in terms of DPS. Then the Battle Standard, incredibly strong as well, a little bit of Might, Fury as well as Swiftness as well, but reviving 5 targets and dealing damage. This is immensely strong, especially in a lot of scenarios like World vs World, or even in some dungeons and raids. This could be incredibly clutch to bring your entire team back from the brink of death. And there are so many other choices. I would definitely have a look at every single choice, play around with them, and just see what works for you out in open world, and switch per the fight. If you're not happy with your setup, just change what needs to be changed to counter whatever the enemy is doing. Now when it comes to skill and utilities training, what do I recommend? Well, my first recommendation is, even though it seems a bit more boring, I always like going for signets first. What this will do is it will put a passive ability on your gameplay, but always have an active skill. Now generally you might not use the active as much. There are some cases like Signet of Rage that you'll pretty much burn off of cooldown, but this will give you a lot of utility with pretty much no effort, and obviously these scale quite nicely with your character's progress. Then I would highly recommend getting the first 2 skills in shout training to the limit and for great justice, to help you with one of your best heal skills as well as one of your best boon coverage skills. Having boons out in open world will be incredibly strong, so I do recommend getting these 2 fairly often. But if you cannot wait, physical training is always a great place to go to. Kick, throw bolas, bull's charge as well as stomp, great damage as well as lots of CC. Having these out in open world, and especially when you get towards dungeon content, having access to CC is incredibly powerful, and having access to these also makes your gameplay quite fun. However, obviously banners are incredibly strong. Again, so much utility for very little effort, especially this battle standard. Having this in group content and open world meta event is incredibly powerful. I cannot stress how many raids I've seen have been saved because of this bad boy. And that's the guide. I really hope you've enjoyed it. If you did, please give it a like and a subscribe. If you didn't enjoy it, thank you so much for watching anyway. If I've missed out anything, please let me know in the comments below. And I really hope this guide helps you in your journey to get into Endgame and Guild Wars 2. I'll see you guys in the next one. Cheers.